You feel behind, not a little behind, not I had an off week behind. You feel like everyone else got a head start and you somehow missed the memo. You scroll through your phone and it seems like people your age are buying houses, building careers, starting families, launching businesses, glowing, thriving, moving forward. And you're just here, trying, thinking, planning, waiting, wondering how you ended up feeling this far behind in your own life. If that's you, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not failing, and you are not running out of time. But something is happening in your mind that's making everything feel heavier than it needs to be. And once you understand it, the shame starts to loosen its grip. Let's talk about what feeling behind actually is. Because it's not laziness, it's not lack of ambition, and it's not proof that you wasted your potential. Feeling behind is usually a sign of chronic comparison mixed with delayed self-trust. You're measuring your internal confusion against other people's external highlight reels, and your brain is filling in the gaps with stories that hurt you. Stories like, I should be further along by now. If I were smarter, this wouldn't be so hard. Everyone else seems to know what they're doing. I've fallen too far behind to catch up. Those thoughts feel true, not because they are true, but because your nervous system is exhausted. When you're tired, overwhelmed, or uncertain, your brain looks for explanations. And the easiest explanation is, something must be wrong with me. But that explanation is wrong. Here's what's actually going on. You are living in a world that constantly tells you to measure your worth by speed. Fast success, early milestones, quick wins, clear timelines. And if your life doesn't match that pace, your brain assumes danger. Because from a psychological perspective, falling behind the group used to mean risk. So your nervous system goes into alert mode. Not panic, more like a low-grade, constant pressure, a pressure that says, catch up, do more, figure it out, don't waste time. But here's the problem. Pressure does not create clarity. Pressure creates paralysis. When you feel behind, your brain doesn't open up. It narrows, you start overthinking every decision. You second-guess paths that might actually be right for you. You hesitate to start anything because you're afraid it won't be the thing. So you wait, you plan, you research. You imagine different versions of your future. And from the outside, it might look like procrastination. But internally, it's fear mixed with hope, mixed with exhaustion. You want your life to move forward. You're just scared of moving it in the wrong direction. That's not laziness. That's decision fatigue paired with high self-expectations. And it's incredibly common in people who are thoughtful, ambitious, and self-aware. Now let's talk about the comparison piece, because this is where most of the damage happens. When you look at other people's lives, you are not seeing their timeline. You are seeing snapshots. You don't see their uncertainty, their missed opportunities, their private doubts, their support systems, their safety nets, their setbacks. You're comparing your entire internal process to their public outcomes. That comparison will always make you feel behind. Always, because your brain doesn't factor in context, it just counts distance. And the more you compare, the more urgency you feel. The more urgency you feel, the harder it is to think clearly. And the harder it is to think clearly, the longer you stay stuck. That's the loop. Another thing no one tells you about feeling behind is this. It often shows up right before growth, not after it, right before. Because when you're about to change, you're standing between two identities, the one you've outgrown and the one you haven't stepped into yet. That space feels awful. It feels like uncertainty, restlessness, impatience, self-doubt, grief for the life you thought you'd have by now. And instead of recognizing it as a transition, most people interpret it as failure. But transitions are uncomfortable by nature. They are supposed to be. Here's something else that matters. You might feel behind because your path doesn't fit standard timelines. Maybe you took longer to figure out what you wanted, change direction, prioritize healing over hustling, dealt with anxiety, burnout, grief, or instability, didn't have the same support or opportunities as others. That doesn't make you late. It makes your timeline different. And different timelines require different pacing. You cannot rush clarity. You cannot bully yourself into readiness. And you cannot shame yourself into becoming someone you trust. The people who look ahead are often just following a script. And scripts don't always lead to fulfillment. Now here's the part that might sting a little, but it's important. Feeling behind can become an identity if you're not careful. You start living as someone who is catching up instead of someone who is building. Every decision becomes reactive. Every step feels insufficient. Nothing feels like enough. So let's reframe this. You are not behind. You are early in your own alignment. You're learning what doesn't work. You're becoming aware of what you actually value. You're noticing patterns you don't want to repeat. That awareness doesn't look productive, but it is foundational. And foundations are invisible until the structure rises. Here's what actually helps when you feel behind. Not motivation, not pressure, not watching 10 more videos about success. What helps is grounding yourself in the present moment and taking one small, honest step. Not the perfect step, not the step that fixes everything, just the next real one. One email, one application, one draft, one conversation, 1 hour of focused work, one decision you've been avoiding. Small action does something important to your brain. It interrupts the story that you're stuck, and once that story loosens, momentum becomes possible again. You don't need to catch up to anyone. You need to reconnect with yourself, your pace, your nervous system, your values, your capacity, because the life you're building isn't a race, it's a relationship, and relationships don't thrive under constant comparison. So if you're watching this because you feel behind, I want you to do one thing when it ends. Not 5 things, not a full plan. One thing, something small enough that you don't argue with it, something real enough that you can't dismiss it. Then stop, breathe, and remind yourself you're not late, you're not broken, you're not failing, you're in progress. And progress is allowed to look quiet before it looks impressive. Stay with yourself, keep going, and take the next step. Not because you're behind, but because you're ready.